Money, the root of all evil, or so they say. Let's look at the evidence.
Come on.
Hello and welcome to Teaching Liberty. I'm Stephanie Edmonds, and in this video, we're talking about money. And who doesn't like money? So go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos or when I go live like this. And make sure that you're following me. It's on that side right there. And for Teaching Liberty Anytime, check out teachingliberty.org. We have a community we're building over there. So definitely go ahead and check that out. But in this video, we are talking about money. We all want it. Some of us have it, at least more than others. And, people say it makes the world go round. Other people say it's the root of all evil. And so I thought to look at this question to discuss this issue, we would go to Atlast Shrugged. It's quite a large book, so don't worry, you don't have to have read the whole thing or any of it at all for this. I'm going to read two sections. One of the people is going to be arguing in favor of money, that money and capitalism is in fact a moral system. And the other is going to be showing us how the opposite of that would work, a more statist or centrally planned system. And we're going to compare and contrast them and talk about it and hopefully be able to come to an answer of this question. What is the morality of money? And more specific to our society today, what is the morality of capitalism? So, before we get into it, I thought we would start off by looking at a quick synopsis of Atlast Shrugged, just for anybody who might not have read it. We're going to read this summary from the Atlas Society. So, it just talks about the structure of the book. It's in 3 different sections, but we'll start off with this right here. The tale is told largely from the point of view of Dagny, the beautiful, superlatively competent chief of operations for the nation's largest railroad, Taggart Transcontinental. The main storyline is Dagny's quest to understand the cause underlying the seemingly inexplicable collapse of her railroad and industrial civilization, and simultaneously her tenacious, desperate search for 2 unknown men. One, the inventor of an abandoned motor so revolutionary it could have changed the world. The other, a mysterious figure who, like some perverse kind of Pied Piper, seems purposefully bent on luring away from society its most able and talented people. An unseen destroyer, she believes, is draining the brains of the world. So this is the main plot line, and then there's this subplot of steel titan Hank Rearden. He's invented a new type of steel, and he's on a spiritual quest to understand unknown forces that are undermining his career and happiness and turning his talents and energies towards his own destruction. And so these 2 characters, they cross paths. You can see they're on similar types of journeys. And so that's just the basics. And then there's one more part I wanted to read down here because there's these directives that are going on from the government. And this is obviously part of the answer of what's causing them to their businesses at this point to be facing towards destruction. But we're going to go ahead and find this here. So there's a new series of dictatorial there's a new series of dictatorial directives. These limit companies' productive output to the average of their competitors, order them to provide all consumers a fair share of their products on demand, right? So you see, we want to make sure that it's fair. So Nobody can make more than anybody else. They forbid them permission to relocate, so you can't move from where you are. You got to stay where you are. And they outlaw quitting one's job. They got to make sure everybody's employed. So you can't quit your job. And they don't say it in here, but anybody who doesn't have a job will be given a job by the planning bureau committee or something like that. So this is what's going on in the story. And it's interesting because I just got off a call about Connecticut housing legislation. And guess what that legislation is called? It's called Fair Share Housing. So I thought it was interesting how many of the themes that we see in this story are going on today. So this is kind of the background. Let's get out of here of the story. And like I said, what we are going to answer tonight is money the root of all evil? Is it a moral system? Is it an immoral system? If we don't use money, what is the alternative? What would society look like without money? How could it be more fair? And so I'm going to start by reading what is known as the money speech by this character, Francisco. And he is a copper mogul, uh, and he's kind of known for his family for generations has been known as great investors, and people feel like they can trust him with their money because everything he does, he's such a great businessman. And he's at a party, and of course, at this party are all the main characters. And Francisco, he's quite an attractive person. He's a playboy. And so, you know, all the people at the party were drawn toward him. But also, their resentment of him was obvious under their smiles. Their faces had the hint of a look peculiar, not to fear, but to cowardice, a look of guilty anger. Francisco stood in the corner against the side edge of a marble stairway, half leaning, half sitting on the steps. The informality of his posture combined with the strict formality of his clothes gave him an air of superlative elegance. He was the only face that had the carefree look and the brilliant smile proper to the enjoyment of a party. But his eyes seem intentionally expressionless, holding no trace of gaiety, showing like a warning signal nothing but the activity of a heightened perceptiveness. Standing unnoticed on the edge of a group, Rearden heard a woman who had a large diamond earring and a flabby, nervous face ask tensely, Senor de Aconia, what do you think is going to happen to the world? Just exactly what it deserves. Oh, how cruel! Don't you believe in the operation of the moral law, madam? Francisco asked gravely. She replied, I do. Rearden heard Bertram Scudder outside the group say to a girl who made some sound of indignation, Oh, don't let him disturb you. You know, money is the root of all evil, and he's the typical product of money. Rearden did not think that Francisco could have heard it, but he saw Francisco turning towards them with a gravely courteous smile. So you think money is the root of all evil, said Francisco de Aconia. Have you ever asked what is the root of money? Money is a tool of exchange which cannot exist unless there are goods produced and men to produce them. Money is the material shape of principle that men wish to deal with one another, must deal by trade and give value for value. Money is not the tool of the moochers who claim your product by tears, or the looters who take it from you by force. Money is made only by the men who produce. Is that what you consider evil? When you accept money in payment for your effort, you do so only on the conviction that you will exchange it for the product of the effort of others. It is not the moochers or looters who give value to money. Not an ocean of tears, nor all the guns in the world can transform those pieces of paper in your wallet into the bread you will need to survive tomorrow. Those pieces of paper, which should have been gold, are a token of honor, your claim upon the energy of men who produce. Your wallet is your statement of hope that somewhere in the world around you, there are men who will not default on the moral principle, which is the root of money. Is that what you consider evil? Have you ever looked for the root of production? Take a look at an electric generator and dare tell yourself that it was created by the muscular effort of unthinking brutes. Try to grow a seed of wheat without the knowledge left to you by men who had to discover it for the first time. Try to obtain your food by means of nothing but physical motions, and you'll learn that man's mind is the root of all the goods produced and of all the wealth that has ever existed on earth. But you say that money is made by the strong at the expense of the weak? What strength do you mean? Is not the strength of guns or muscles? Wealth is the product of man's capacity to think. Then is money made by the man who invests in a motor at the expense of those who did not invent it? Is money made by the intelligent at the expense of the fools? By the able at the expense of the incompetent? By the ambitious at the expense of the lazy? Money is made before it can be looted or mooched, made by the effort of every honest man, each to the extent of his ability. An honest man is one who knows that he can't consume more than he has produced. Indeed. To trade by means of money is the code of men of goodwill. Money rests on the axiom that every man is the owner of his mind and his effort. Do you feel like you own your mind and your effort? Money allows no power to prescribe the value of your effort except the voluntary choice of the man who is willing to trade your I'm sorry. Money money allows no power to prescribe the value of your effort except the voluntary choice of the man who is willing to trade you his effort in return. Money permits you to obtain for your goods and your labor that which you are worth to the men who buy them, but no more. Money permits no deals except those mutual benefit by the unforced judgment of the traders. Money demands of you the recognition that men must work for their own benefit, not for their own injury, for their gain, not their loss, the recognition that they are not beasts of burden, born to carry the weight of your misery, that you must offer them values, not wounds, that the common bond among men is not the exchange of suffering, but the exchange of goods. Money demands that you sell not your weakness to men's stupidity, but your talent to their reason. It demands that you buy not the shoddiest they offer, but the best that your money can find. And when men live by trade with reason, not force, as their final arbiter, it is the best product that wins, the best performance, the man of best judgment and highest quality. And the degree of a man's productiveness is the degree of his reward. This is the code of existence whose tools and symbols is money. Is that what you consider evil? But money is only a tool. It will take you wherever you wish, but it will not replace you as the driver. It will give you the means for satisfaction of your desires, but it will not provide you with the desires. Money is the scourge of men who attempt to reserve the law of causality, the men who seek to replace the mind by seizing the products of the mind. Money will not purchase happiness for the man who has no concept of what he wants. Money will not give him a code of values if he's evaded the knowledge of what to value, and it will not provide him with a purpose if he's evaded the choice of what to seek. Money will not buy intelligence for the fool, or admiration for the coward, or respect for the incompetent. The man who attempts to purchase the brains of his superior to serve him with his money, replacing his judgments, ends up by becoming the victim of his inferiors. The men of intelligence desert him, but the cheats and the frauds come flocking to him, drawn by a law which he has not discovered, that no man may be smaller than his money. Is that the reason why you call it evil? Only the man who does not need it is fit to inherit wealth. The man who would make his own fortune no matter where he started. If as an heir If an heir is equal to his money, it serves him. If not, it destroys him. But you look on and you cry that money corrupted him. Did it? Or did he corrupt his money? Do not envy a worthless heir. His wealth is not yours, and you would have done no better with it. Do not think that it should have been distributed among you. Loading the world with 50 parasites instead of one would not bring back the dead virtue, which was the fortune. Money is a living power that dies without its roots. Money will not serve the mind that cannot match it. Is this the reason why you call it evil? Money is your means of survival. The verdict you pronounce upon the source of your livelihood is the verdict you pronounce upon your life. If the source is corrupt, you have damned your own existence. Did you get your money by fraud? By pandering to men's vices or men's stupidity? By catering to fools in the hope of getting more than your ability deserves? By lowering your standards? By doing work you despise for purchasers you scorn? If so, then your money will not give you a moment or a penny's worth of joy. Then all the things you buy will become not a tribute to you, but a reproach, not an achievement, but a reminder of shame. Then you'll scream that money is evil. Evil because it would not pinch hit for your self respect. Evil because it would not let you enjoy your depravity. Is this the root of your hatred of money? Money will always remain an effect and refuse to replace you as the cause. Money is the product of virtue, but it will not give you virtue, and it will not redeem your vices. Money will not give you the unearned, neither in matter nor in spirit. Is this the root of your hatred of money? Or did you say it's the love of money that's the root of all evil? To love a thing is to know and love its nature. To love money is to, within you, in your passkey, to trade your effort for the effort of the best among men. It's the person who will sell his soul for a nickel, who is the loudest in proclaiming his hatred of money, and he has good reason to hate it. The lovers of money are willing to work for it. They know they are able to deserve it. Let me give you a tip on a clue to men's character. The man who damns money has obtained it dishonorably. The man who respects it, has earned it. Run for your life from any man who tells you that money is evil. That sentence is the leper's bell of an approaching looter. So long as men live together on earth and need means to deal with one another, their only substitute if they abandon money is the muzzle of a gun. By money demands you of the highest virtues if you wish to make it or to keep it. Men who have no courage, pride, or self esteem Men who have no moral sense of their right to their money and are not willing to defend it as they defend their life. Men who apologize for being rich will not remain rich for long. They are the natural bait for the swarms of looters that stay under the rocks for centuries but come crawling out at the first smell of a man who begs to be forgiven for the guilt of owning wealth. They will hasten to relieve him of the guilt and of his life as he deserves. Then you will see the rise of men of the double standard. The men who live by force yet count on those who live by trade to create the value of their looted money. The men who are the hitchhikers of virtue. In a moral society, these are the criminals. And the statutes are written to protect you against them. But when a society establishes criminal by right and looters by law, men who use force to seize the wealth of disarmed victims, then money becomes its creator's avenger. Such looters believe it's safe to rob defenseless men once they've passed a law to disarm them. But their loot becomes the magnet for other looters, and who get it from them as they got it. Then the race goes. Not the ablest at production, but those most ruthless at brutality. When force is the standard, the murderer wins over the pickpocket. And then that society vanishes in a spread of ruins and slaughter. Do you wish to know whether that day is coming? Watch money. Money is the barometer of a society's virtue. When you see that trading is done not by consent but by compulsion, when you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing, when you see that money is flowing to those who get richer by graft and pull than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them but protect them against you, when you see the corrupting begin to being rewarded and honesty being a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. Money is so noble a medium that it does not compete with guns, and it does not make terms with brutality. It will not permit a country to survive as half property, half loot. Whenever destroyers appear among men, they start by destroying money, for money is men's protection and the base of a moral existence. Destroyers seize gold and leave it to its owners a counterfeit pile of paper. This kills all objective standards and delivers men to the arbitrary power of an arbitrary setter of values. Gold was an objective value, an equivalent of wealth produced. Paper is a mortgage on wealth that does not exist, backed by a gun aimed at those who were expected to produce it. Paper is a check drawn by legal looters upon an account which is not theirs, upon the virtue of the victims. Watch for the day when it bounces marked account overdrawn. When you've made evil the means of survival, do not expect men to remain good. Do not expect them to stay moral and lose their lives for the purpose of becoming the fodder of the immoral. Do expect them to produce. I'm sorry. Do not expect them to produce. When production is punished and looting rewarded, do not ask who is destroying the world. You are. You stand in the midst of the greatest achievement of the greatest productive civilization and you wonder why it's crumbling around you, why you're damning its lifeblood, money? You look upon money as the savages did before you and wonder why the jungle is creeping back to the edges of your city? Throughout men's history, money has always throughout men's history, money was always seized by looters of one brand or another, whose names changed but whose methods remain the same. To seize wealth by force and keep it to seize wealth by force and to keep producers bound, demeaned, defamed, deprived of honor. The phrase about evil of money, which you mouth with such righteous recklessness, comes from a time when wealth was produced by the labor of slaves. Slaves who repeated the motions once discovered by somebody's mind and left unimproved for centuries. So long as production was ruled by force and wealth was obtained by conquest, there was little to conquer. Yet through all the centuries of stagnation and starvation, men exalted the looters as aristocrats of the sword, as aristocrats of birth, as aristocrats of the bureau, and despised the producers as slaves, as traders, as shopkeepers, as industrialists. To the glory of mankind, there was, for the first and only time in history, a country of money. And I have no higher, more reverent tribute to pay to America for this means, a country of reason, justice, freedom, production, achievement. For the first time, man's mind and money were set free. There were no fortunes by conquest, but only fortunes by work. And instead of swordsmen and slaves, there appeared the real maker of wealth, the greatest worker, the highest type of human being, the self made man, the American industrialist. If you ask me to name the proudest distinction of Americans, I would choose, because it contains all others, the fact that they were the people who created the phrase to make money. No other language or nation has ever used these words before. Men have always thought of wealth as a static quantity, to be seized, begged, inherited, shared, looted, or obtained as favor. Americans were the first to understand that wealth has to be created. The words to make money hold the essence of human morality. Yet these are the words for which Americans were denounced by the rotted cultures of the looter continents. Now the looter's credo has brought you to regard your proudest achievements as a hallmark of shame. Your prosperity is guilt, your greatest men, the industrialists, as blackguards, and your magnificent factories as the product and property of muscular labor, the labor of whip-driven slaves like the pyramids of Egypt. The rotter who simpers that he sees no difference between the power of the dollar and the power of the whip ought to learn the difference of his own hide, as I think he will. Until and unless you discover that money is the root of all good, you ask for your own destruction. When money ceases to be the tool by which men deal with one another, then men become the tools of men. Blood, whips, and guns, or dollars. Take your choice. There is no other choice, and your time is running out. Francisco had not glanced at Rearden since he had once while speaking, but the moment he finished, his eyes went straight to Rearden's face, and Rearden stood motionless, seeing nothing but Francisco de Acuña across the moving figures and angry voices between them. There were people who had listened but now hurried away, and people who said, "It's horrible! It's not true! How vicious and selfish!" saying it loudly and guardedly all at once, as if wishing their neighbors would hear them, but hoping that Francisco would not. Senor de Acuña, declared the woman with earrings, "I don't agree with you. If you can refute a single sentence I uttered, madame, I shall hear it gratefully." "Oh, I can't answer you. I don't have any answers. My mind doesn't work that way, but I don't feel that you're right. So I know that you're wrong." "How do you know it?" "I feel it. I don't go by my head, I go by my heart. You might be good at logic, but you're heartless. Madame, when you see men dying of starvation around us, your heart won't be of any earthly use to save them. And I'm heartless enough to say that when you'll scream, 'But I didn't know!' you will not be forgiven." The woman turned away and shuddered, running through the flesh of her cheeks and through the anger tremor of her voice. "Well, it's certainly a funny way to talk at a party." A portly man with evasive eyes said loudly, his tone of force cheerful, suggesting that the sole concern is any issue was not to let it become unpleasant. "Well, if this is how you feel about money, senor, I think I'm darn glad that I've got a goodly piece of Deconia copper." Francisco said gravely, "I suggest you think twice about that, sir." And so we'll stop right there. I thought reading some of those reactions was definitely worth it though, because it very much reminded me of how people react when I say things. Oh, you're heartless. And then especially over these past 2, 3 years when we've just been at each other so much. Oh, I can't engage with those questions. Or definitely very reminiscent of the um liberal tears joke that Ben Shapiro is known for making, right? Facts over feelings. So that's the side that's arguing for money and the morality of that. I appreciate you, John, checking in here. It's hard to keep track of the comments when you're reading. So I want to compare that now with what the alternative is, right? Because it's either things are based on individual freedom, right? I own myself, my body, my mind, more importantly, which directs my body, and I own the things which I produce or which I procure with the honest use of my mind and my body, right? And other people can do the same so long as they do it honestly. And that's what individual liberty is based on. And so the other option would be you don't own the things that you produce and you're forced to distribute them among other people. And so I'm going to read a scene. It's a chapter later, and it's between Rearden, who we talked about in the beginning. He is the steel industrialist. He invented a new type of steel. And interestingly, when he first invented it, all of the governmental organizations and the steel workers union or whatever the three-letter thing is, they were like, oh, this metal is horrible, the trains are going to crash, da 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 da. Well, after proving itself, now everybody wants it. The government wants it, they need more of it. And so Dr. Ferris, he's a government man, is going to Rearden's office to make him a deal, also known as blackmail. But let's get there. So it starts. Entering Rearden's office, Dr. Floyd Ferris wore the expression of a man so certain of the success of his quest that he could afford a benevolent smile. He spoke with a smooth, cheerful assurance. Rearden had the impression that it was the assurance of a card sharp who has spent a prodigious effort in memorizing every possible variation of the pattern and is now safe in the knowledge that every card in the deck is marked. Well, Mr. Rearden, he said by way of greeting, I didn't know that even a hardened hound of public functions and shaker of famous hands like myself could still get a thrill out of meeting an eminent man, but that's what I'm feeling right now, believe it or not. How do you do? Said Rearden. Dr. Ferris sat down and made a few remarks about the color of the leaves in the month of October, and as he observed them by the roadside on his long drive from Washington, and this is Washington, D.C., undertaken specifically for the purpose of meeting Mr. Rearden in person. Rearden said nothing. Dr. Ferris looked out the window and commented on the inspiring sight of Rearden's mills, which he said were one of the most valuable, productive enterprises in the country. That's not what you thought of my product a year and a half ago, said Mr. Rearden. So remember, I told you when he first came out with it, everybody was against it. It was the worst thing in the world. Um, Sort of like how our three-letter agencies like to pick and choose which products they like and which ones they don't. So he goes, that's not what you thought a year and a half ago. Dr. Ferris gave a brief frown, as if a dot of the pattern had slipped and almost cost him the game. Then he chuckled as if he recaptured it. Oh, that was a year and a half ago, Mr. Rearden, he said easily. Times change and people change with times. The wise ones do. Wisdom lies in knowing when to remember and when to forget. Consistency is not a habit of mind which is wise to practice or to expect of the human race. He then proceeded to discourse upon the foolishness of consistency in a world where nothing was absolute except the principle of compromise. He talked earnestly, but in a casual manner, as if they both understood that this was not the main subject of their interview, yet, oddly, he spoke not in the tone of a foreword, but in the tone of a postscript, as if the main subject had been long settled. Rearden waited for the first, "Don't you think so?" and answered, "Please state the urgent matter for which you requested this appointment." Dr. Ferris looked astonished and blank for a moment, then said brightly, as if remembering an unimportant subject which could be disposed with without effort, "Oh, that. That was in regard to the dates of delivery of Rearden metal to the State Science Institute. We should like to have 5,000 tons by the 1st of December, and then we'll be quite agreeable to waiting for the balance of the order until after the 1st of the year." Oh, we'll just let you know. The State Science Institute will just take that steel now, Mr. Rearden. Isn't it so nice how he just says it so nicely? Rearden sat looking at him silently for a long time. Each passing moment had the effect of making the gay intonations of Dr. Ferris's voice, still hanging in the air of the room, seem more foolish. When Dr. Ferris had begun to dread that he would not get an answer at all, Rearden answered, "Hasn't the traffic cop with the leather leggings, whom you sent here, given you a report on this conversation with me?" "Why, yes, Mr. Rearden, but, well, what else do you want to hear?" "But that was 5 months ago, Mr. Rearden. A certain event has taken place since, which makes me quite sure that you have changed your mind and that you will make no trouble for us at all, just as we make no trouble for you." So they're referring to basically 5 months ago, he was approached by somebody else to provide metal, and he was like, "No, not doing it." So they put out a new directive giving more enforcement power to the government. And so they're figuring, oh, they're going to arm him this time. No, 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 no. Okay. So, but that was 5 months ago, Mr. Rearden. A certain event has taken place since, which makes me quite sure you've changed your mind, and that will be no trouble for us at all, just as we make no trouble for you. What event? An event of which you have far greater knowledge than I, but you see, I do have knowledge of it, even though you would much prefer me to have none. "What event?" said Rearden. "Since it is your secret, Mr. Rearden, why not let it remain a secret? Who doesn't have secrets nowadays? For instance, Project X is a secret. You realize, of course, that we could obtain your metals simply by having it purchased in smaller quantities by various government offices who would then transfer it to us. And you would not be able to prevent it. But this would necessitate our letting a lot of lousy bureaucrats." Dr. Ferris smiled with disarming frankness. "Oh, yes, we are as unpopular with one another as we are with you private citizens. It would necessitate our letting a lot of other bureaucrats in on the secret of Project X, which would be highly undesirable at this time. And so, any newspaper publicity about the project, if we put you on trial for refusal to comply with the government order. But if you had to stand trial on another much more serious charge, where Project X and the State Science Institute were not involved, and where you could not raise any issue of principle or arouse any public sympathy, why, that would not inconvenience us at all, but it would cost you more than you would care to contemplate. Therefore, the only practical thing for you to do is to help us keep our secret and to get us help and to help us keep yours. And I'm sure you realize we are fully able to keep any of the bureaucrats safely off your trail for as long as we wish." "What event? What secret? What trail?" asked Rearden. "Oh, come on, Mr. Rearden, don't be foolish. The 4,000 tons of Rearden metal which you delivered to Ken Daniger." "Of course," said Dr. Ferris lightly. Rearden did not answer. Issues of principle are such a nuisance, said Dr. Ferris, smiling, and such a waste of time for all concerned. Now, would you care to be a martyr for an issue of principle? Only in circumstances where nobody will know that that's what you are? Nobody but you and me. Where you won't get a chance to breathe a word about the issue or the principle? Where you won't be a hero, the creator of a spectacular new metal, making a stand against enemies whose actions might appear somewhat shabby in the eyes of the public? Where you won't be a hero, but a common criminal, a greedy industrialist who cheated the law for plain profit motive, a racketeer of the black market who's broken the national regulations designed to protect public welfare? A hero without glory and without public, who will accomplish no more than about a half a column of newsprint somewhere on page 5. Now, would you still care to be that kind of martyr? Because that's just the issues amount that's just what the issue amounts to now. Either you let us have your medal, or you go to jail for 10 years and you take your friend Daniger along too. As a biologist, Dr. Ferris had always been fascinated by the theory that animals had the capacity to smell fear. He had tried to develop a similar capacity himself. Watching Rearden, he concluded that the man had long since decided to give in because he got no trace of fear. "Who was your informer?" asked Rearden. "One of your friends, Mr. Rearden, the owner of a copper mine in Arizona, who's reported to us that you purchased an extra amount of copper last month above your regular tonnage required for the monthly quota of Rearden metal, which the law permits you to produce." Oh, isn't that nice? The law permits him to produce a certain amount. "Copper is one of the ingredients of Rearden metal, isn't it?" That was all the information we needed. The rest was easy to trace. You mustn't blame that mine owner too much. The copper producers, as you know, are being squeezed so badly right now that the man had to offer something of value in order to obtain a favor, an emergency need ruling, which suspended a few of the directives in his case and gave him a little breathing spell. So he did a favor. He gave them information so that they would change a law so that they could survive another month, apparently. Isn't government so great? "The person whom he traded his information knew where it would have him the highest value, so he traded it to me, and in return for certain favors he needed. So all the necessary evidence, as well as the next 10 years of your life, are now in my possession, and I am offering you a trade. I'm sure you won't object since trade is your specialty. The form may be a little different from what was in your youth, but you're a smart trader and you've always known how to take advantage of changing conditions. And these are changing conditions of our day, so it should not be deficient or it should not be difficult for you to see where your interests lie and to act accordingly." Rearden said calmly, "In my youth, this was called blackmail." Dr. Ferris grinned. "That's what it is, Mr. Rearden. We've entered a much more realistic age." But there was a peculiar difference, thought Rearden, between the manner of a plain blackmailer and that of Dr. Ferris. A blackmailer would show signs of gloating over his victim's sin and of acknowledging its evil. He would suggest a threat to the victim and a sense of danger to them both. Dr. Ferris conveyed none of it. His manner was that of dealing with the normal and the natural. It suggested a sense of safety. It held no tone of condemnation, but a hint of comradeship. A comradeship for both of them on self-contempt. The sudden feeling that made Rearden lean forward in a posture of eager attentiveness was the feeling that he was about to discover another step of his half-glimpsed trail. Seeing Rearden's look of interest, Dr. Ferris smiled and congratulated himself for having caught the right key. The game was now clear. The markings of the pattern were falling right into the order. Some men thought Dr. Ferris would do anything so long as it was left unnamed, but this man wanted frankness. This was the tough realist he had expected to find. "You're a practical man, Mr. Rearden," said Dr. Ferris amiably. "I can't understand why you should want to stay behind the times. Why don't you adjust yourself and play it right? You're smarter than most of them. You're a valuable person and we've wanted you for a long time. And when I heard that you were trying to string along with Jim Taggart, I knew you could be had. Don't bother with Jim Taggart. He's nothing. He's just flea bait. Get into the game. We can use you and you can use us. Want us to step on Orrin Boyle for you? He's giving you an awful beating. Want us to trim him down a little bit? It can be done. Or want us to keep Ken Daniger in line? Look how impractical you've been about that. I know why you sold him that medal. It's because you need to get coal from him. So you take a chance on going to jail, paying huge fines just to keep on the good side of Ken Daniger? Do you do you call that good business? Now make a deal with us and just let Mr. Daniger understand that if he doesn't toe the line, he'll go to jail, but you won't because you've got friends and he hasn't. And you'll never have to worry about your coal supply from then on. Now that's the modern way of doing business. Ask yourself which way is more practical. And whatever anyone said of you, nobody's ever denied that you're a great businessman and a hard headed realist. That is what I am, said Rearden. That's what I thought, said Dr. Ferris. You rose to riches in an age when most men were going bankrupt. You've always managed to blast obstacles, to keep your mills going, and to make money. That's your reputation. So you wouldn't want to be impractical now, would you? What for? What do you care so long as you make money? Leave the theories to people like Bertram Scudder and the ideals to people like Balfour Eubank. These are authors that they mention at other points in the book. You be yourself. Come down to earth. You're not the man who'd let resentment interfere with business. I'm sorry, who would let sentiment interfere with business? No, said Rearden slowly. I wouldn't. Not any kind of sentiment. Dr. Ferris smiled. Don't you suppose we knew it? He said, his tone suggesting that he was letting his patent leather hair down to impress a fellow criminal by display of superior cunning. We've waited a long time to get something on you. You honest men are such a problem and such a headache, but we knew you'd slip up sooner or later, and this is just what we've wanted. You seem pleased about it. Don't I have good reason to be? But after all, I broke one of your laws. Well, what do you think laws are for? Dr. Ferris didn't notice the sudden look on Rearden's face, the look of a man hit by the first vision of what he had sought to see. Dr. Ferris was past the stage of seeing. He was intent upon delivering the last blows to an animal caught in a trap. Did you really think that we want those laws to be observed? Said Dr. Ferris. We want them broken. You'd better get it straight, and it's not a bunch of Boy Scouts you're up against. Then you'll know that it's not the age for beautiful gestures. We're after power, and we mean it. You fellows were pikers, but we get the real trick, and you'd better get wise to it. There's no way to rule innocent men. The only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, there aren't enough criminals. When there aren't enough criminals, one makes them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. Who wants a nation of law abiding citizens? What's in that for anyone? But just pass the kind of laws that can neither be observed nor enforced nor objectively interpreted? And you create a nation of lawbreakers, and then you cash in on guilt. Now that's the system, Mr. Rearden. That's the game. And once you understand it, it'll be much easier. You'll be much easier to deal with. Watching Dr. Ferris watch him, Rearden saw the sudden twitch of anxiety, the look that precedes panic, as if a clean card had fallen on the table from the deck Mr. Ferris had never seen before. What Dr. Ferris was seeing in Rearden's face was the look of luminous serenity that comes from the sudden answer to an old dark problem, a look of relaxation and eagerness together. There was a useful clarity in Rearden's eyes and the faintest touch of the contempt in the line of his mouth. Whatever it meant, and Dr. Ferris could not decipher it, he was certain of one thing. The face held no sign of guilt. There's the flaw in your system, Dr. Ferris, Rearden said quietly, almost lightly. A practical flaw which you will discover when you put me on trial for selling 4,000 tons of Rearden metal to Daniger. It took 20 seconds. Rearden could feel them moving slowly, at the end of which Dr. Ferris became convinced that he had heard Rearden's final decision. Do you think we're bluffing? Snapped Dr. Ferris. His voice suddenly had the quality of an animal's he had spent so much time studying. It sounded as if he were baring his teeth. I don't know, said Rearden. I don't care one way or the other. The evaluation of action as practical, Dr. Ferris, depends on what it is that one wishes to practice. Have you always placed your self-interest above all else? That is what I'm doing right now. If you think that we'll let you get away with it, will you please get out of here now? Who do you think you're fooling? Dr. Ferris's voice had risen close to the edge of a scream. The day of barons of industry is done. You've got the goods, but we've got the goods on you, and you're going to play, or we're going to. Rearden had pressed a button. Miss Ives entered the office. Dr. Ferris had become confused and lost his way, Mrs. Ives, said Rearden. Will you please escort him out? He turned to Ferris. Miss Ives is a woman. She weighs about 100 pounds, and she has no practical qualifications at all, only a superlative intellect of efficiency. She would never do for a bouncer in a saloon, only in an impractical place, such as a factory. And so that's the end of the conversation between Rearden and Dr. Ferris. And in it, Dr. Ferris, I think, gives the equivalent of the soliloquy given by Francisco de Acuña in the first section that I wrote, where Dr. Ferris is laying plain on the table his cards, the way that his system would work, his system based on making sure everybody has their fair share, something that must then be ultimately centrally planned, right? Because we have to decide what's fair and not fair. Some people make too much money and are better at making things than others, so we have to equalize it. And we see how that works out. It's based on favor. It's based on arbitrary rules and laws and the limited perspective of a select group of people who is making these laws or directives versus money, where two people can come together and they can decide the terms of the deal. And of course, there's all sorts of factors. You have to know, you have to have a self-awareness of what you're truly capable of. Now, I don't think that we should undercut ourselves, but I think that we should also be realistic. I think that's actually something that's made me more valuable, right? When you are real about what your strengths and what your weaknesses are and your role within a company or within your family, whatever context you're talking about, you can be more effective at that thing and get better and provide more value at what you are good at. And just have better relationships overall, because that's also about the whole point of what this is about, right? It's about sustaining life and improving life. And since everything, as we established, is based on property, right? I am my property. I am my own property. My mind is my property. Things that I produce and procure are extensions of what I got. Therefore, they are my property. Everything is based around property rights. And I think we've come to see like wealth and things as having some sort of immorality to it, because the system is rigged. And yeah, those who are gaining a lot of things and wealth are often doing it because they're gaining favor. So it does make money seem bad. But is it the money or is it the system? So I don't think we fully answered this question, but I would definitely love to know what your thoughts. I know there's been a couple people in here leaving comments. It's a little hard to read and check those out, but if you're catching this replay, definitely let me know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think about Francisco's speech on money and the morality of money and of capitalism? What do you think of the portrayal of the alternative? Do you think it's fair? Like, obviously, these are kind of idealized contrast, right? Juxtapositions of ideas. But I think that they're generally right. They're based on the root principles from which you can lay other specific examples upon, and I think come to accurate conclusions. But again, let me know what you think in those comments down below. I appreciate you checking in, reading along. It's a long one, but I do highly recommend Atlast Shrugged, or really anything by Ayn Rand. She's a great writer, both just the way that she writes about scenery and develops characters, and then the morals and the principles that she's telling, I think are especially relevant right now, but they're timeless, really, right? Liberty is an eternal battle to keep. So definitely check out Ayn Rand. Definitely subscribe to my channel, because maybe we'll be reading more excerpts of Ayn Rand or other great works related to principles and philosophies of liberty. And until next time, appreciate you. Thank you for checking in, John. And, if you think free, live free.